of AC 360. We are waiting for the votes to come in from West Virginia and the Democrats' long, hard fight for their party's presidential nomination. Our exit polls show Bernie Sanders is the early leader over Hillary Clinton. And as expected, of course, the Republican presumptive nominee, Donald Trump, is the winner in West Virginia. I'm Anderson Cooper in the CNN Election Center. Welcome, as I said, to this edition of AC 360. Let's go to Wolf Blitz.
Anderson, we got some key race alerts, the first ones of the night coming in. Take a look at this in West Virginia. Hillary Clinton has a slight lead. Only 2% of the vote is in. She's got 50.6% to Bernie Sanders, 41.3%. Once again, very, very early. We have projected, we have not been able to make any projections, but Bernie Sanders is the early leader based on the exit poll information. But these are the first hard votes. She's up by about 308 votes right now, very, very early. I want to check in with Jeff Zeleny. He's joining us right now. Jeff Zeleny is in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where the Democrats have a primary a week from today. You're covering Hillary Clinton. What's the reaction over there to what we know so far, Jeff?
Well, if the Clinton campaign is wanting to move beyond these West Virginia results, they do not believe that they will win in West Virginia this evening, but they're trying to figure out why they're not doing better among some of these white working class voters. There is going to be a string of states. If she loses tonight in West Virginia, you can add Indiana onto it, add Michigan onto it, some other states. They're trying to figure out if she can sort of appeal to that set of voters here. The campaign is spending a lot of time researching these voters to see if they are open to supporting her. They do not believe tonight she will be victorious. And Wolf, she is on an airplane right now flying home to New York. She gave a speech here in Louisville earlier this evening. She said she's looking forward to going after Donald Trump, to debating Donald Trump in the fall. But that, of course, is going to have to wait at least a little bit longer. But the Sanders campaign is out in Oregon tonight. Well, if they believe that they are going to go at least through these last primary phases and pick up so many more wins. Now, they know mathematically it is all but out of their reach. She is leading him by some 300 pledged delegates and many more than that when you add in superdelegates. But the Sanders campaign believes a win tonight in West Virginia and perhaps next week in Oregon and down the line will add to their argument that he should stay in this race. But Wolf, we've seen a big shift here over the last week or so. He is dialing back his criticism of her intently, focusing far more on Donald Trump. So you can start to feel this Democratic Party at least sort of coming together here, Wolf. Another page is turning in this campaign, regardless of the outcome in West Virginia tonight.
Yeah, and Hillary Clinton's focusing her attention almost exclusively on Donald Trump as well. Let's check in with Sarah Murray right now. She's over at Trump Tower in New York, watching what's going on. No surprise, he had no opposition in West Virginia. He won that Republican presidential primary, Sarah.
That's right, Wolf. And the Trump campaign expected to win in West Virginia. They expected to have a good night tonight, and that's why the other candidates are out of the race. So they're clearly planning about what comes next, planning to unify the Republican Party. A big part of that is going to be this meeting that's coming up with Paul Ryan on Thursday. And I spoke to a campaign advisor who sort of reiterated the same kind of optimism we saw from Donald Trump on Twitter today, expecting this meeting to go well. And the advisor told me that they expect Donald Trump and Paul Ryan to come out of this meeting and find some common ground, particularly on issues like debt reduction. Now, this does not mean that all is well with efforts to sort of unify Donald Trump and the Republican Party at large. You know, we saw this meeting between Donald Trump aides and RNC staffers that lasted about 3 hours yesterday, but I'm hearing from sources familiar with that meeting that there was a little bit of tension coming out of it, that there still is a belief from some Trump staffers that some staffers at the RNC would have preferred to see a nominee other than Trump. Obviously, these two sides are going to have to work together in a general election, but still a little bit of friction remaining, Wolf.
Yeah, they got a lot of work to do. All right, Sarah Murray at Trump Tower in New York. Jake, back to you.
Thanks, Wolf. One of the things that we always look for is who is turning out to vote in contests like the one we're covering this evening, and what's on their minds. How are they feeling? Let's bring back David Chalian, our political director here at CNN. David, one of the common themes we've seen when it comes to people turning out to vote for Donald Trump is they do not trust Republican elites, the Republican officials. How do tonight's voters fare?
Right. So you heard Sarah Murray talking about that meeting between the RNC and the Trump campaign. These are the numbers that set the stage for Donald Trump going to Capitol Hill and dealing with the Republican Party leadership. In Nebraska, do you feel betrayed by Republican Party politicians? 64% of Nebraska Republican primary voters today say yes. 30% say no. Let's look in West Virginia. 50% say yes, they feel betrayed by Republican politicians. 47% say no. So we see majorities in both states there. Now, how about their feelings about the federal government? Back to Nebraska. 53% dissatisfied, 40% angry at the federal government, 93% dissatisfied or angry. West Virginia, you see a little less hostile environment there, but still 92%, 50% angry, 42% dissatisfied are about their feelings towards the federal government. Donald Trump walks to Washington with this army of voters behind him as he begins his quest to bring the establishment on board with the Trump candidacy.
Interesting. A lot of federal money goes to West Virginia, and yet only 2% of the Republican voters who turned out this evening are enthusiastic about the federal government.
That's a great point. The days of Robert C. Byrd, the longtime senator from there who brought back a lot of money and was loved for it, are obviously long gone.
It's still flowing to West Virginia,
it is still flowing. But on those numbers, you know, I've just been thinking a lot about it and watching, obviously, what happened, but also remembering how the atmosphere has been so intense within the Republican Party on Capitol Hill, among the very Republicans Trump is going to talk to. And one of the common themes since the Tea Party helped Republicans take over in 2010 inside the Republican conference is, if I vote the wrong way, I'm going to get primaried, meaning somebody is going to challenge me from the right. And so, you know, they were trying to read the anger in the electorate a certain way, but they sort of never really got it. Donald Trump got it. Mm-hmm. He really did. He became the vessel and the vehicle for that anger, and that really does and should, as David said, set the stage for these conversations that they're going to have. It's true, and it's actually not that surprising when you just look at the electorate, that there would be an appetite for somebody on the Republican side who has a very anti-illegal immigration message. That's been a big issue bubbling up for a long time. Who has a message against these trade deals that both Democrats and Republicans. And that is a huge reason why Donald Trump has done so well. And also somebody who has a very different take on foreign policy, a non-interventionist take. Anderson?
Yeah, and obviously very much at odds with Hillary Clinton on a lot of those issues. I mean, when you look at those numbers in the exit polls, 92, 93% either angry or dissatisfied. I mean, that's stunning.
And add in how pessimistic they are about the current direction of the economy.
Right.
Usually 2/3 in these states. You're seeing 67, 66% there. So they don't think the economy's headed in the right direction, and they don't think the people in this town who are supposed to represent them have put the train on the right track. They think the country's off on the wrong track, and the professional conductors, if you will, keep screwing it up. So Donald Trump is not an ideological candidate. He's a message candidate. Right. He makes everybody in this town nervous. He makes Republicans nervous. He makes Democrats nervous. He makes the media nervous. Republican voters out there, Trump voters is a distinction to be made. Trump voters say, good. He makes everybody nervous. He's going to come into this town and tip the apple cart over. That's what they want.
I think he's a message candidate, and he's the ultimate outsider. And by the way, as dissatisfied as people are with government and what their government does for them, he's a candidate who says, leave Social Security alone. I don't want to touch it. I mean, Paul Ryan is saying, you know, you've got to cut back on entitlements. Donald Trump is basically leaving government alone, saying, yeah, we got to get rid of
Again,
the
I mean, but it is interesting to point out, I mean, he's the ultimate outsider, but he's also been an insider, giving to both, you know, to all sides for a long time.
But he inoculates himself on that chart by saying, I'm honest about it.
We got to take a quick break as we wait for more votes out of West Virginia in the Democratic race. We're going to hear from Donald Trump's former rivals, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They are speaking out about him and their plans going forward. Stay with us.
The nominee.
Right. Support but not yet endorse Donald Trump or necessarily vote for Donald Trump. An interesting distinction there. I mean, we talked about this several hours ago when David Gergen was here. He was surprised that Corey Lewandowski was the person that Donald Trump has picked to head the search for vice president. Does it surprise you, John?
Does it surprise me? If you look back in history, you usually pick a big name, you go get a heavyweight in the party. So does it surprise you if you look back at how John McCain did it, or how George W. Bush did it, or how Michael Dukakis did it, or how Bill Clinton did it? Yes. But does it surprise me based on what we've seen from Donald Trump throughout this campaign? I think we talked about this earlier. He has a small, dedicated core of people. Loyalty matters to him. In his view, Corey Lewandowski helped him get to this point where he convincingly blew out a field of experienced Republican politicians who had a combined 193 years of elected office experience.
Right.
Donald Trump's the last man standing. Corey Lewandowski managed his campaign. If you're Donald Trump, you're thinking, this is working so far. Yeah. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, and I I think sort of Corey Lewandowski doesn't really matter. I think the ultimate decision that matters is who gets that pick, who the vice presidential pick is. If you noticed when he unveiled that Chris Christie was leading the transition team, he talked about loyalty in terms of Chris Christie. He talked about Chris Christie as a confidant. I think confidant, those things are very important to Donald Trump, which I think is why Chris Christie's name keeps sort of floating around. This idea that a team like that, Chris Christie sort of knows government, but he's still an outsider. He's obviously in New Jersey, doesn't know the sort of ins and outs of Washington.
Right, which Donald Trump has said in repeated interviews that that's what he's looking for.
But he could also be kind of a credible, I think, government sort of agent in terms of helping Donald Trump figure out the ways of Washington, but not tainted by it.
So he's also on brand.
Yeah, he's on brand.
And
it's sort of doubling down.
You know, conventional wisdom, I guess, establishment folks like me, would suggest Donald Trump addresses deficiencies with his Veep pick. I would actually expect Trump to not really care about filling up, plugging up a hole. Yeah. I think it matters more to him that the Veep pick is loyal, and also a reflection of him, and on brand and on message. And I think Chris Christie is as close as you're going to get to someone with actual experience who is on message, who would actually take the job.
I think taking the job.
Lewandowski is probably a reflection of the fact that the usual suspects of elder statesmen are not willing to volunteer for this task.
Well, he does have a law firm involved in the search.
Yeah, Jones today. And I would say this business about the grizzled elders picking is a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, if you think back to, the rise of people that are now, past Hamilton Jordan and Jody Powell and Bobby Kennedy in 1959 and 1960. Who was Bobby Kennedy? He was just the candidate's brother, for heaven's sakes, and his campaign manager, I might add. And yet he's in the room when the decision is made as to who should be on the ticket. I mean, so now everybody, we have statues for these people and all this. Somewhere down the road, I don't know whether there's a statue for Corey Lewandowski. I'm just saying that when you bring in new people into the system, this is how it's done, and people they're not members of the club, right. And everybody's trying to figure out what's up.
I think you're right. And as a campaign guy, though, the risk of a campaign guy heading this up is that they think like I do, which is, how do we win? It's the only thing you're thinking about. How do I get to 270? How do I win? The problem with that is this is a governing decision. This is your first presidential decision. When Clinton picked Gore, I was involved in it. Frankly, I didn't want Gore. And I asked the governor that. I was like, why Gore? What does he bring? He's the same age, he's the same religion, he's the same region, he's the same ideology. And he interrupted me. He said, Paulie, I might die. And I thought, oh my God, this is a different game. I honestly believe that's what President Obama did. President Bush with Cheney, he thought, if something happens to me, who could ruin the country? He's like, that dude could definitely.
And President Bush with Dan Quayle.
Never misses enough.
The headline for me is that former President Clinton called you Paulie like Rocky called Paulie, his brother-in-law Paulie.
There's about 6 people.
I'm now forever going to know you as Paulie.
For a very, very tiny group of people, they still call me that. He's
if you have a meat locker that somewhere goes
by millions.
Like meat Paulie. Anyway, sorry.
I thought until this moment I was incapable of blushing, so thank you for bringing that out of me.
You're not.
Well, I think Trump probably thinks he'll live forever. So I don't know that he's concerned about the
That's what Jack said to Bobby. Bobby said, God, don't pick Johnson. What if you die, Jack? And Jack said, Bobby, I'm not going to die. And Clinton told me that story too.
Right.
And you have to, we've only had 43 people serve as president. 9 of them got there because the president died or resigned. This is a huge governing choice.
We're learning new information about Bernie Sanders' campaign strategy in these final weeks of the primary season. Could it actually help him win the nomination? Details ahead of 360.
Bernie people who I think will find, and some of them may have to do with gender as well. I mean, this cab driver I was talking to, he liked Obama, he liked Bernie, and he liked Trump. He didn't like Hillary. I'm like, what? You got 3 people.
Yeah, what is It's also, I think, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it bears saying again, it's a tone thing. Yes, populism is cyclical and it swings through election cycles every few years, but it's more than that. I think for a lot of the voters you're talking about, Obama's professorial, very deliberate, very, intellectual kind of tone has sounded as if politicians, him included, first and foremost, have been talking over and talking down to voters for the past 8 years, on the left and the right. But I think Obama's sort of been the poster boy for that. And so I think a lot of voters appreciate Bernie and Trump's telling it like it is.
The word for what you're saying is political correctness. The word's plural is political correctness.
So that's how you would describe it.
We're watching the votes come in from West Virginia. We're digging deeper into our exit polls. We'll tell you what we're learning about the vulnerabilities both for Hillary Clinton and Trump in a likely general election matchup. A lot more ahead.
But with 10% of the vote counted, we're just going to have to wait. Well, if not, just flip this over quickly just to prove the point. Donald Trump is essentially unopposed. One of the questions, it's the first contest since Senator Cruz, Governor Kasich suspended their campaigns. So one of the questions is there a backlash? Is there a protest vote? It appears really not to be. Donald Trump on track. Again, only 8% of the vote, so we'll count the rest of them. But he's up near 70% right now, which is pretty overwhelming. So this one we're going to watch. Keep switching back just to see if it moves at all. Then you move through these counties. It's relatively close. She's up a little in that county. He's up a little in this county, which tells you as we go early in at just 10%. We're going to have to wait.
What about in Charleston?
And count. That's right. Let's pop it up there. Obviously, this is a big population center in the state, more than 10%. She's ahead at the moment, but again, with 2,000 votes each side, 4% of the vote in here, big county here. So we're just going to have to count them. We'll see.
All right, 10% of the vote in West Virginia. Let's take a quick break. We'll get more.